Good morning, let me tell you something the world won't say out loud. Most people don't know how to think. They react, they follow, they copy, but they rarely think. And if you want to succeed in life, really succeed, you must learn how to think correctly today. I will teach you. Most people think thinking correctly means following rules, checking boxes, doing what the book says, or what society expects. They believe it's about being logical, smart, or even educated. But let me break this illusion. Thinking correctly isn't about how much you know. It's about how you choose to think. And that journey begins when you stop thinking like everyone else. Correct thinking is not the same as common thinking. In fact, most of the time it's the opposite. What's common is often wrong. People accept opinions as facts, trends as truths, and traditions as laws. But thinking differently forces you to question everything, not to be rebellious, but to be real. Look around. Everyone wants success. Everyone wants opportunity. But few are willing to challenge the pattern they were taught to follow. They move in herds, they wait for permission, and they fear being wrong more than they desire to be right. But correct thinking demands a different approach. It requires you to step out of the mental traffic jam and take a new road, even when that road is empty, uncertain, and full of criticism. Thinking differently means you stop asking, "What are they doing?" and start asking, "What should I be doing?" You stop copying formulas and start creating them. You stop living someone else's version of life and start writing your own. This is not comfortable. It never is, but it's necessary. Correct thinking is born in uncomfortable questions. Why do I believe this? Who told me that? What if the opposite is true? What if success isn't about working harder, but thinking smarter? What if I've been chasing goals that don't even belong to me? What if my environment is feeding me limits disguised as advice? To think differently, you need mental courage, not just intelligence, courage to disagree. Courage to unlearn. Courage to say, this doesn't work for me, even when the world says it worked for us. When you think differently, you will face resistance. People will doubt you, challenge you, even mock you. They'll say you're crazy, foolish, knave. But those words are proof that you're no longer trapped in their cage. The truth is, most people think by default. They let emotions guide logic. They let social norms decide goals. They let fear filter decisions. But thinking differently means choosing your thoughts, designing your beliefs, building your own mental operating system, not renting someone else's. Thinking differently does not mean rejecting wisdom. It means testing it. It means being bold enough to listen, but wise enough to decide. It means taking advice and turning it into insight, not instruction. Correct thinking isn't loud, but it's sharp. It doesn't always speak first, but it sees deeper. It doesn't seek attention, it seeks understanding. And here's something no one tells you: thinking differently is a lonely process. It separates you from the crowd. It makes you feel like an outsider. It forces you to be your own teacher. But that's where correct thinking starts. Not in agreement, but in exploration. Everyone wants innovation. Everyone wants success, creativity, leadership. But those things don't come from thinking like everyone else. They come from stepping back, clearing your mental desk, and asking, what's real? What matters? What works for me? That's not arrogance. That's ownership. Correct thinking isn't taught. It's trained. Trained through mistakes, reflection, and risk. Trained by thinking differently again and again until it becomes normal. Until standing out feels more honest than fitting in. Until your mind becomes your most powerful asset, not just a storage unit for recycled ideas. Emotions are powerful. They move people, start revolutions, build relationships, and drive ambition. But the same emotions that lift you can also mislead you. They can cloud your judgment, distort your perspective, and push you into decisions that feel good for a moment, but collapse in the long run. If you want to think correctly, you must learn to use emotion as a signal, not a solution. Use it as fuel, not direction. This is where logic becomes your anchor. Most people make decisions based on how they feel in the moment. They quit because they're tired. They argue because they're angry. They spend because they're excited. They hold back because they're afraid. But emotion alone doesn't ask, is this right? Or is this smart? It only says, this is how I feel right now. And for many, that's enough. That's a problem. Correct thinking means you listen to your emotions, but you don't obey them blindly. It means you feel your fear, but don't let it paralyze you. You recognize your frustration, but you don't let it make your decisions. Emotion is honest. It tells you what you're experiencing, but logic tells you what you should do about it. Let's be clear, emotion is not the enemy. You're not a robot. You're a human being. Emotion gives life meaning. It makes you care. It makes you dream. It makes you feel alive. But emotion without logic is a storm with no compass. It rages, it reacts, it consumes. And when it passes, you're left cleaning up the damage, wondering what went wrong. Think of emotion as the engine. It gives you energy. But logic is the steering wheel. It gives you direction. One without the other is dangerous. With only emotion, you'll crash. With only logic, you'll stall. But together, passion guided by clarity, you become unstoppable. Logic gives you perspective. It steps back when your feelings try to take over. When you're insulted, emotion says, get revenge. Logic says, is it worth it? When you're afraid to take a risk, emotion says, play it safe. Logic asks, what's the cost of doing nothing? When you're excited about an opportunity, emotion says, say yes now. Logic says, read the details first. That space, that pause, is the difference between reaction and leadership. Leaders, winners, builders, they feel just like everyone else. But they don't decide like everyone else. They use logic to filter emotion. They use facts to test feelings. They ask, what outcome do I want? And then reverse engineer their choices. Emotion pushes, but logic directs. And that is the skill most people never develop. To think correctly, you must train yourself to slow down. When emotion rises, stop and ask questions. What is the truth here? What's actually happening? What are the facts, not just my feelings? This doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. It doesn't mean you ignore how you feel. It means you don't let it drive the car blindfolded. People will call you too calm. They'll say you're too calculated. That's fine. Most people overreact, regret, apologize, repeat. Let them. You have a different job. Your job is to stay sharp. Think clearly. Respond, don't react. Let your emotions speak, but let your logic decide. When others panic, your logic will keep you grounded. When others celebrate too early, your logic will keep you focused. When everyone chases hype, your logic will ask, where's the value? This is how correct thinkers win, not because they don't feel, but because they don't let feelings make final decisions. Most people are terrified of failure. They avoid it like a disease. The moment they feel it approaching, they retreat. They stop trying, stop pushing, stop believing. Why? Because they were taught that failure means the end. The end of your chance, the end of your reputation, the end of your potential. But that's not the truth. The truth is failure is not a stop sign. It's a signal. It's a message. It's feedback from life telling you something you need to hear. When a baby falls trying to walk, no one says, well, walking's not for you. When a musician hits a wrong note, no one says, you should give up. But somewhere along the way, people grow up and get scared. They forget that failure is part of the system, not an error in it. They forget that behind every strong mind is a long list of losses that didn't destroy them. They shaped them. Failure is data. It tells you what doesn't work, what needs to change, what you didn't prepare for. It shows you the cracks in your strategy, your thinking, your skills. But instead of using that information to grow, most people let it define them. They hear, you failed, and translate it into, you're a failure. That's not correct thinking. That's emotional thinking dressed up as logic. Correct thinkers don't fear failure. They study it. They get curious. They ask, Why did this go wrong? What did I miss? What can I do better next time? Because they know failure is a teacher with tough love. It doesn't flatter your ego. It doesn't sugarcoat, but it always tells the truth. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is part of it. Every successful person has a resume full of rejections, closed doors, broken deals, bad decisions, and painful lessons. But they didn't let those moments end them. They let those moments inform them. Every setback was a signal pointing them to something better, something smarter, something they would not have discovered if everything had worked on the first try. The world doesn't reward those who never fall. It rewards those who keep standing up. It rewards those who fail fast, learn faster, and keep moving forward. That's the real skill, not avoiding failure, but navigating through it with intelligence, resilience, and self-awareness. You don't fail because you're weak. You fail because you're trying. You fail because you're growing. The person who never fails is either not doing anything or not learning anything. And that's the real failure. Not losing, but being too afraid to play. Correct thinkers change their relationship with failure. They stop seeing it as a personal attack and start seeing it as professional development. When they fall, they don't just get back up. They come back smarter. They update their strategy. They tighten their execution. They analyze the process. They listen to the signal instead of ignoring it. Failure gives you two options. You can run from it or you can read it. If you run, you repeat. If you read, you refine. The people who rise are the ones who treat failure like a compass, not a cliff. They let it point them in new directions. They let it expose what needs to change. They let it strengthen them where they were weak. The road to success is paved with failures, not because success is cruel, but because failure is part of training. You are being prepared, sharpened, tested, not punished, but prepared. Failure isn't a dead end. It's an instruction. It's a message that says, not this way, but keep going. The world rewards clarity, not confusion. But too often, people confuse intelligence with complexity. They believe that the more complicated something sounds, the smarter it must be. They stack jargon, overthink strategy, and drown in unnecessary details. But thinking correctly is not about sounding sophisticated. It's about cutting through noise. It's about turning the complicated into something clear, sharp, and actionable. That's real intelligence. That's real power. Complexity is often a disguise, a way to hide behind the unknown. People complicate things when they don't truly understand them. They use big words to avoid facing simple truths. They build 10-step plans for problems that require one honest decision. They decorate confusion instead of solving it. But correct thinkers don't fall for that trap. They strip everything down to the core. They don't ask, how can I make this look impressive? They ask, what's the real problem? What actually matters? What is the next move? Correct thinking starts with simplification. Not because the world is simple, but because your brain needs clarity to act. If your goals are vague, your actions will be scattered. If your strategy is complicated, your team will be confused. If your mindset is overloaded, your progress will stall. The clearer you think, the stronger you move. Look at the best solutions in history. They are elegant, not excessive. The best ideas are often one sentence. The best advice is usually a single line. The best leaders speak so clearly that anyone can follow them. Why? Because they don't think in circles. They think in patterns. They remove the fluff, the fear, the ego, and they get to the point. Simplicity is not the enemy of depth. Simplicity is what allows you to reach depth. When you simplify, you're not making things shallow. You're going deeper into the essence of a problem. You're not ignoring complexity. You're managing it. You're translating chaos into something understandable, usable, and effective. When you walk into a situation and you're overwhelmed by 100 moving parts, correct thinking asks, what are the 3 that actually matter? When you're buried under information, correct thinking says, what is the single decision this is leading to? When everyone else is panicking, spinning, or overanalyzing, correct thinking finds the signal buried in the noise and locks in. People complicate things when they're insecure. They think more layers mean more value, but confidence speaks simply. Confidence doesn't need decoration. It doesn't need to impress, it needs to work. That's why correct thinkers aren't afraid to cut, delete, or remove. They know the real solution isn't built by adding more. It's built by making it leaner, sharper, clearer. Simplifying the complex is a discipline. It's not a lack of knowledge. It's a test of control. Can you take a tangled problem and explain it in 30 seconds? Can you make your goals so clear that even a child could understand them? Can you remove the parts that feel good but don't add value? That's how correct thinkers operate. They're not just smart, they're focused. Complexity slows down action. It creates hesitation. It breeds fear. People procrastinate not because the task is hard, but because they don't know where to start. Simplification fixes that. It puts the spotlight on what matters. It turns ideas into steps. It turns dreams into plans. It turns confusion into clarity, and clarity into momentum. If you can't explain it simply, you probably don't understand it deeply. If you can't act on it clearly, it probably needs to be broken down again. Simplification is not a one-time act, it's a habit. Every day you face problems, ideas, plans, distractions, and your job is to strip each one down until only what matters remains. One of the biggest mistakes people make is living only in the moment or only in the future, never balancing both. They either get lost in short-term gratification or paralyzed by long-term dreams. But correct thinking requires alignment, the ability to hold a long-term vision while executing short-term moves. The people who rise, who build, who win, they're not just dreamers and they're not just doers, they are both. Thinking long-term means having a vision that stretches beyond today's pressure. It means seeing beyond what's urgent and paying attention to what's important. It means asking yourself, where am I trying to go? What kind of life, business, mindset, or legacy am I trying to build? Without this perspective, your daily actions become random. You start reacting to life instead of directing it. But thinking long-term alone is not enough. There are people with 5-year plans and 0 daily discipline. They talk big, but act small. They speak about the future, but waste the present. Correct thinkers understand that vision without execution is hallucination. So, while they think years ahead, they act within the next hour. They break the big goal into the next phone call, the next step, the next action, no matter how small it seems. The long term gives you direction. The short term gives you momentum. One without the other creates imbalance. If you only think short term, you make impulsive decisions, chasing quick wins and burning out. If you only think long term, you sit in analysis paralysis. Over-planning, overthinking, underdoing. But the fusion of both creates a mindset that builds while it moves. It's forward-focused and action-oriented. Correct thinkers wake up every day with 2 clear thoughts. Where am I headed? And what do I need to do today to move an inch closer? That's it. No drama, no delay. No waiting for perfect timing. They think in decades and execute in days. They carry a big map in their head and a tight checklist in their hand. That's why they win, not because they always move fast, but because they always move smart. Thinking long-term keeps your emotions in check. When you know your destination, today's problems don't shake you as much. A bad meeting won't make you quit. A lost client won't break your confidence. A rough month won't convince you that your vision is wrong. You're playing a bigger game. You're thinking like a builder, not a gambler. You don't need to win today. You need to keep building today. But action is what separates thinkers from creators. Acting short-term means you stop waiting for perfect conditions. You stop saying, someday, and start asking, what now? You take your big ideas and bring them down to the next decision, the next message, the next task. Because if you can't break your dream into steps, it's just fantasy. Execution is what gives your vision weight. Without it, it's just words. Correct thinkers don't waste time chasing shortcuts. They know real growth compounds over time. That's why they focus on consistency, not intensity. They'd rather take 100 small, smart steps than one big, unsustainable leap. They think about systems, not spurts. They think about habits, not hype. They invest in actions that pay off long after today is over. There's a quiet confidence in this mindset. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to plant, water, build, and adjust. You're not chasing dopamine, you're building direction. You measure progress in lessons, not just results. And you understand that everything long-term is built one short-term choice at a time. In conclusion, so, when I say, I will teach you how to think correctly, I'm not talking about textbook intelligence or flashy ideas. I'm talking about building the mental habits that separate the lost from the focused, the reactive from the strategic, the ordinary from the exceptional. Thinking correctly means starting with thinking differently. Challenging your old beliefs, flipping the script, and questioning what the crowd accepts. It means using logic when emotion wants to take over and recognizing that failure isn't the end, it's information. It means simplifying what's complicated so you can actually move, not just think. And most importantly, it means holding a long-term vision while executing daily without excuses. Correct thinking is not a talent, it's a discipline. It's a choice. It's a mindset that can be trained, sharpened, and strengthened if you're willing to do the work. Once you master how to think, everything else becomes manageable. Your goals, your challenges, your time, your future. Most people are out here looking for better answers. But the winners, they're the ones asking better questions. And thinking correctly is where that starts.